So in my last video, I explained how I'm going to be installing some speakers onto the rear parcel shelf of my car using some old repurposed computer speakers. How about scrap all that? We are now going to do this properly. So as you saw when I filmed originally, I was going to repurpose my old speakers, fit them into the car and just go ahead like that. Then I realised that while I was doing it is that they worked, but there was still some room for improvement. Like there was an improvement in the clarity overall, but I kind of wanted to get a bit more thump. So I decided I was going to do some research into it, just know a bit more stuff which will help me out, and which has led me to some changes which I'm going to cover. So as you saw, the way I wired the speakers, I cut into the original harness and then added some wires on, which I connected to the speakers to test, and which worked fine. Like that's not a problem. However, there's factors that I didn't consider, which are actually really important when you're doing something like this. First thing is your head unit, the amplifier inside it, which is pretty much how much power is going out to each channel. That is an important thing when you're deciding your speakers and stuff like that. And even though those speakers did actually work, they weren't the best of what it could be. For example, the speaker range, the frequency in hertz, for lower bass and stuff like that, like let's say like subwoofer sort of level, that's normally below 100 hertz, getting towards maybe like 30, something like that, 20. The speakers that I'd used when I was testing them have a minimum range from about 80, 100 hertz, which is kind of like, of course, you'll cover from obviously from 100 all the way up to 20,000, no problem. But it's those lower lows which create the thumping bass, which obviously these speakers are lacking, which is why I didn't hear any of that when I tested it out. Depending on what you're looking for in your setup, but for me, this is important. There was no point me cutting up the parcel shelf, installing these speakers for something that is kind of half in the middle, not even exactly what I wanted or what I was looking for. There's no point. So now here are the changes which I'm going to be making. So pretty much the way I wired the speakers, by cutting into the harness and adding the wires on, this is called parallel. I'm going to add some diagrams or some drawings. I'll either find some or make them myself. And there's either series or parallel circuits. In series, it's like a daisy chain. You're pretty much connecting the speakers up one to another, and then it comes back to where the positive and negative come from. However, parallel is literally from the source splitting into 2 or 3, however many, etc. So the speakers aren't connected to each other in a link from the actual terminals, but instead they have their own separate wires going to them from that actual source. It kind of made sense, to be honest. I don't really even think about wiring it in series. One is inconvenient, obviously having to join it up from the actual existing rear speakers and adding a cable on from there to the speakers in the back. So parallel made perfect sense, and parallel is the better option for the speakers. And now this is where it gets a bit more interesting with this. So the amplifier is made for 4 times 50 watts pretty much. So I've already changed the speakers in the front. They're not a problem, they're great. It's just the back which I'm focusing on, which is the point of this whole video. So pretty much this is where you need to research and check in either your stock amplifier or whatever head unit you've got in your car and see what the ratings are. You will find this information online. You might need to do a bit of digging, but it's very important that you do this for it to work properly. So why this is important is because the amplifier has this rating of ohms, the impedance, which is the resistance of the circuit. For me, in this case, it's 50 watts with a range of 4 to 8 ohms. Anything less than 4 ohms is not good and can damage the amplifier, because it means the amplifier is putting out more current than it should, than it's rated to do, which can obviously make it burn out, for example. Higher resistance is pointless, because if there's too much resistance in your circuit, then the speakers aren't getting the power they need. They're not going to sound great. What on earth is the point in that? So by wiring speakers in series, the daisy chain, like I was saying, you pretty much double the impedance, the ohms, the resistance. So by having the stock speaker, which is 4 ohms, and adding another speaker, which is 4 ohms, in series, that would make it 8 ohms, which is fine. The amplifier is rated to do that. However, the sound quality is not going to be optimal. That's not the best it could be. You're not going to get much improvement over just having one speaker, because you're pretty much splitting it across the 2. When you wire it in parallel, the ohms, the resistance, the impedance, that gets halved. So what that means is that two speakers, which are obviously the stock one 4 ohms, the ones I'm adding in, which are going to be 4 ohms, that now makes the circuit 2 ohms. So it halves it. Now this is obviously important because the amplifier is only rated to put out 4 ohms minimum. And by having 2 ohms means that it's putting out more than it should. Speakers always draw out more current when it comes to the lower frequencies, the lower hertz, which is the most bassiest parts. You could just imagine, obviously it's putting out too much current, heavy bass, turning up the speakers. It's not going to be any good for the amplifier. So what I've done is, because parallel wiring for the speakers is the best setup and always will be, I'm sticking with parallel setup. However, the change is I'm no longer going to use those speakers because, as I said, with the frequency range, they don't meet my needs. So what I've done is I've ordered a pair of speakers. These speakers are going to be perfect for the Seat, and I cannot wait to actually fit them in and get them all set up because these speakers match the car perfectly. They have the right frequency. I think they go to about lowest about 25 hertz, which is plenty. The only thing that I need to do is, like I said with the ohms, because in parallel it's only going to be 2 ohms and it needs to be 4. I've also ordered some resistors, which will bring the circuit back to 4 ohms, which means the amplifier will be happy with that and it's perfectly safe and it's fine. I thought I'd just give a update on where we are with this. Old speakers that I'm using are scrapped. New speakers are coming, which are going to be great. I'm really hyped for these. It's gonna be great. It's gonna look the part. It's gonna sound the part. That's exactly what I'm going for. And the thing is, I might be going way over the top with this, but it's more for the, what's the point in having the fun with them for a bit and then your amplifier blows. And if you've got a nice head unit, like the one in the car, it's a nice touchscreen, it's got Apple CarPlay and all that stuff. I don't fancy blowing it up, to be honest. So I can always get an aftermarket amp, but that's at another stage. I'm doing it with what's there. So yeah, that's the update for now. Literally, I've just got home from work. My top is dirty. I've got a haircut. You can tell it's been a week. So that's the update as it is right now. I'm hoping the rest of the stuff arrives by the end of the week. And then after that, I can just get straight to it and make this happen. So until then.